right, welcome to the Ruby Rogues podcast. Today on our panel, we have Brian Hogan.
Hi, everyone.
And with us today is Hongli Lai.
Hello.
So, you're a pretty big person in my eyes. I mean, you have created something that I use every day. So I just want to start off with thank you for your work with Passenger. It has been a huge difference in my life. So thank you very much. And would you mind telling us a little about you, your company, and some of the products that you offer?
Yeah, sure. And I'm really glad you like Passenger. I mean, one of the reasons why I made Passenger is to make people happy. So I'm really glad I succeeded in that for certain people. So as for how Phusion started in 2008 when it was just my co-founder and myself. So my other co-founder is Ning. We started Phusion back when we were students at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. We always had this dream of starting a company for ourselves, but we didn't really know what to do until we somehow got into this Rails ecosystem, and it really got us excited about all the things that are going on there, all the improvements that we'll make, and how different it was from the establishment. And we saw a clear need there to improve the production story. Like, people found deploying to production to be really difficult because people were not used to the model that Rails used to deploy, namely setting up a bunch of mongrels and a bunch of processes and reverse proxying that to some web server. Instead, people were more used to a PHP-like style of deployment where you just have a bunch of files that is your app and tell your web server, there is my app, and have the web server take care of the process management and the routing and that kind of stuff for you. And that is the idea behind Passenger. Passenger is a change in the deployment style, in a change in the usability, and that's why that's how we made Passenger better in terms of making Rails deployment easier.
Let's take a break from this episode and really quickly talk about finding a job. You know, searching for a job can feel stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through an interview process just to find out that the very end that the salary offer or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Well, there's a solution. Hired.com is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities. They make the job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of how and when you connect with compelling opportunities. And after completing one simple application, top employers apply to you. And the best part is that you get money. That's right. They pay you if you get a job through them. Listeners to this show can earn double their normal hiring bonus by signing up with the show's link. That's right, you get $2,000 instead of $1,000. So go sign up at hired.com/RubyRoguesPodcast.
That's how we made Passenger better in terms of making Rails deployment easier.
That's really cool because it's funny to me how in Ruby land and in Rails land especially, we kind of keep coming up with these different ways of doing the deployments, and we can kind of keep bouncing back. Let's use Thin, let's use Unicorn, let's use Puma, let's these different approaches, and every one of them I've tried, I always kind of keep coming back to Passenger because of that thing that it's simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It doesn't take nearly as long to set up. And it's well done. It's mature, and so a lot of that credit goes to Phusion and you for doing all that work to help the mere mortals get their applications deployed.
Yeah, the mere mortal thing, that is one of our core philosophy. Like at least from my point of view, even before Phusion, I came from a background where I find usability really important, not only for companies, but also for for my users, even before Phusion, I've always had the philosophy that user interfaces should be simple, even command line user interfaces, even server stuff, and computers should be there to serve humans, not the other way around. If something can be done by the computer, why should you have to tell it what to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point for programmers to keep in mind. That's one of the things that always that drew me after all the Java and the PHP and the ASP stuff I'd done in my career. What drew me to Ruby was the fact that most of the people who were doing the big things in the Ruby community had that same mindset of, we're not here to bow to the whim of the compiler or the interpreter. We're here to write software and do it in a way that's efficient and I'll dare say fun. And so that's really cool. That's your core philosophy, and it shows through the product development that you're all doing. What's the current state of Passenger?
The current state of Passenger, the latest version is 5.1, in which we have introduced many more features, improvements in performance and robustness, etc. It is an iterative improvement upon the 5.0 series, and you guys might know the 5.0 series from the Raptor campaign, in which we drastically improved performance, and now we have added all sorts of, well, you could say refinements to make it even better in production and even better to in terms of usability and making life easier for developers and sysadmins. But it's a culmination of lots and lots and lots of little changes as opposed to one or two big changes.
Yeah, that whole Raptor campaign created kind of an upstir in my world. I'm like, what is this thing? What is it going to do? And how is it going to affect my passenger deployments? So you definitely had me on a rope there for a bit. Then I'm like, oh, cool. It's the next version of Passenger. That's awesome. So
Yes. And underwater, in the Raptor campaign, there was actually a lot of engineering going on. I don't know whether you have read the blog post. I think I spent 1 or 2 months full time working on rewriting all sorts of stuff to make Passenger faster. And there just was no single hotspot that I could optimize. And suddenly Passenger was 80% faster. Instead, I had to optimize like 30 different small things that each make Passenger 0.5% faster. So it was quite a hectic ride.
Oh, I bet. Well, even though all your work may go unnoticed sometimes, I know that if you had not done all this work, people would notice, so your contributions have definitely made a huge difference. So what are some of the new features in Passenger 5.1, from its previous versions?
Let me open the blog announcement. Well, there has been new features for minimizing and preventing downtime. For example, there are when writing software, all the corner cases really matter, especially when something is in production. Normally, programmers don't really like to think about error handling, and a lot of people think, okay, I'll just catch an exception, print an error, and done. Sometimes that is the right approach, but a lot of times error handling can be really, really complex. And in Passenger, we do our best to handle errors correctly because, hey, the site has to stay online. But there are weird corner cases somehow, cases that we haven't thought of that might result in the website behaving not correctly if we don't handle errors in specific situations in different manners. So we have added various small tweaks in various parts of Passenger to make sure that Passenger stays stable in those cases. For example, we have added fixes that would ensure passenger doesn't board when there is an NTP update and your system clock suddenly shifts with a few seconds. That could really mess up the timers inside passenger that normally take care of the internal I/O events for you. Or we have looked at how passenger integrates with the log file rotation system on Ubuntu, for example, and we had to modify certain aspects in Passenger to make sure that they play nicely. That sort of thing.
And currently you have two different versions of Passenger, a open source and an enterprise version. At what point should someone start to consider that the open source version they have kind of outgrown and they really should consider switching to your enterprise version?
That is, well, normally people come to us when they need a specific feature. So Passenger Enterprise has a number of well-documented features, and I think that the best way for people to judge whether they need Enterprise is whether they need a specific feature or if they need support from us, because support is also a large part of our offering. We are the Passenger author, so you can ask your questions directly to us, and we are probably better able to answer your question than, for example, random searches on Stack Overflow. What we usually do is we try to consider the whole picture, the whole stack, and we can give customized consultancy based on that.
So Rails 5 introduced the action cable stuff for WebSockets. How does Passenger work with that, and how difficult was that to implement?
Well, implementing action cable support was not really that difficult, but there were a few challenges that were not very obvious. For example, action cable used RAG API calls that were not part of the standard. I believe that in Rails 5.1, a call was added that would call write non-block or something with a specific parameter on it, and the rec spec doesn't allow that, but the Rails author still assumed that it is there. So we had to debug the action cable test application, see where the error was, because no error was logged. The thread that ran action cable just died without logging something. So it took quite a while to even find out where it went wrong. But when we found the source of the problem, the fix was really simple. It is a lot of small things like this. It's just the problem is that they are not obvious, and it takes a lot of time to find out how to find them. It's a lot of polishing work.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense, and it's fun to hear those kinds of stories. Just to kind of see, it seems from the outside it seems so simple. Like, why don't you just support this feature? Then when you dig into it, it's like, oh my goodness, and it's sort of peeling back the layers of the onion to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and while peeling the layers, you sometimes find rotten parts that you wouldn't think are there. That's why we have two blog posts that document in detail how we have improved Action Cable, how we have found vulnerabilities and bugs in Action Cable, and how we fixed them.
So you send those back up. You send those back upstream to the Rails team and say, "Hey, we found these things. You might want to fix them."
Yes, we did.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I know that currently Action Cable works really well with a combo of Nginx and Passenger. Have you guys worked out the support with Apache and Passenger for Action Cable? Or
right
what
now,
kind of roadblocks are there?
Well, right now we haven't, but Apache itself is its IO system is not really nice to work with, so to say, and it doesn't really help that a lot of things in Apache seems to be under-documented. We also haven't really noticed a lot of demand from people who want to use WebSockets in combination with Apache. Because there's always something more important to do, it is not really high on our to-do list until there is a clear demand for it. Well, what we've told people so far is if you're interested in serious WebSocket work or Action Cable work, go use Passenger in combination with Nginx. And so far, we haven't really received any complaints.
That's interesting. So it's a lot of times I've seen in consultant work and I've seen Apache and a Passenger as kind of this combo that's just always there. So it's interesting to hear that it's sort of these the way Rails is moving and the way that Apache works and is sort of affecting the ability for people to continue on that pathway. And that's really interesting for me to hear.
Yeah, there are more issues in Apache that are not so nice. For example, last time I heard that the event npm in Apache, which is supposed to make Apache about just as scalable as Nginx, apparently it doesn't work well with SSL. And then I think, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, I'm still a big fan of Apache, and I still use it daily. But any kind of Rails 5 application that I'm using WebSockets on, I definitely spin up on Nginx. But it's kind of cool and kind of strange too that Apache does work as a reverse proxy. So if you have a Apache load balancer, you can still send through the WebSocket upgrade request to Nginx, and Passenger handles it nicely. But you still need that Nginx layer at the web server level right behind Passenger.
Well, you don't really need an Nginx layer behind Passenger. Or maybe you meant before Passenger?
Yeah, in front of Passenger. Sorry.
If you set up Passenger behind a reverse proxy, you actually you can actually skip the Nginx layer entirely. Since version 5 in Passenger, we have this thing called the built-in mode, in which you can connect the Passenger core directly to whatever reverse proxy you're using, and skipping any potential overhead that that the middleman could introduce.
I could simplify some of the infrastructure stuff, and then you just make sure that you pass through the upgrade requests, the WebSocket upgrade requests from the reverse proxy, and everything just gets handled perfectly.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Great. I have a lot of work to do tonight then. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to check that out. So as far as the Ruby version, for those listeners who don't know, you still have to have your web server, which connects to your application server, in our case, Passenger, but you still need a Ruby interpreter installed. Hongli, what is your preferred method of having the Ruby version on the server? Do you go with a system Ruby, or do you use a Ruby manager like RVM or CH Ruby or anything like that? What's your preferred method?
My preferred method is RVM, and this is probably very controversial because I used to recommend a system Ruby with apt packages or RPMs or whatever your system package manager is to install Ruby. And I know that a lot of people prefer CH Ruby or RBN because they have had a lot of problems with RVM. Well, the reason why I recommend RVM is because RVM has a similar philosophy to Passenger, if you will. They focus really on the usability aspect. For example, they would install dependencies for you in order to build Ruby. Now, I'm not exactly sure whether RBN also does that kind of thing nowadays, but when I last used RBN, it didn't, and I had to figure out, okay, what do I need to apt-get install just to be able to install Ruby using RBN, or what other projects do I need to git clone in order to make all this work? Well, RVM is like, okay, you just type this in and it works, and it does all the dependencies for you, and I really like that. I also haven't run into any problems with RVM as other people claim they have. So I've never seen the stability issues. And finally, the reason why I don't recommend system Rubies anymore is because a lot of people seem to lock down their application to a specific Ruby tiny version. For example, they want Ruby 2.2.1 specifically and not Ruby 2.2.2. Well, you can't do that with a system Ruby package. It will always upgrade to the latest minor version.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on board with you on there. I like RVM, and all the controversy around it, I've just not experienced. So maybe some stuff has changed in the recent years that, for all the naysayers, they should give it another fair shot. And
Yeah, absolutely.
And as far as installing Passenger, what's your preferred method? Because I know that now you have the omnibus method where you can do an apt install or a yum install, whatever the Red Hat side of things are. But you can also include Passenger into your gem file. What's your preferred or recommended way of doing that?
Okay, I'm not sure what you meant by omnibus, but we do provide RPM and Debian packages, and that is the method we recommend. Pick whatever package that we officially provide that is the most specific to your operating system. If you are using Debian Ubuntu, use our packages for that. If you're using Red Hat or CentOS, use our packages for that. For everything else, pick a generic thing like a tarball or a gem. That is because in our Debian and Red Hat packages, we have specific integrations in place in order to make Passenger work better with those operating system. For example, it sets security up in the right way. On Red Hat, we install an SE Linux profile so that you can use Passenger together with that. I know that a lot of people disable SE Linux on Red Hat because they don't really understand it, and it is perceived as being more trouble than it is worth. But we really think that SE Linux adds value in terms of protecting the system, and that is why we have gone through the last mile, or well, it was a very, very, very long last mile, but that's another story, to integrate well with SE Linux and other sorts of system stuff.
That's really good to know that you've got the sort of generic way of doing it, but a more specific way so that you can really take advantage of this for specific stuff for each operating system. It's really good to know that, especially for the SE Linux stuff, because I'm in that same camp where I see a lot of people at advice on forums and stuff. Oh, just disable it. Like, no. Don't turn stuff off that you don't understand what it does. That's sort of not the approach that we should be taking as admins or software developers. Don't just turn something off you don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I do understand why they turn things off. SE Linux is, from a usability standpoint, it's a massive pain, and their documentation is really not that good.
Absolutely.
If they just improve the documentation, have more resources out there, it would improve SE Linux adoption so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you ever have issues crop up in production that you don't see in development? Do you even know how your app is performing in production? Performance, errors, and analytics to figure out where your app is bogging down are important to keep an eye on. You could try one of those error tracking apps, but why not use a tool that does it all? Try Datadog. Datadog tracks performance, collects data on your errors, and provides you with the information you need to improve your user's experience and fix bugs without having to log into the production server and dig through the logs. What if my app spans across multiple servers and services, you ask? Datadog seamlessly collects metrics from every corner of your application, including services like Amazon AWS and systems like Redis. So whether you want a clear view into your application's performance, need to be notified of new errors, or to keep track of your application across various services you use Datadog. If you go to devchat.tv/Datadog and start a free trial, they'll send you a free Datadog t-shirt.
Absolutely.
If they just improve the documentation, have more resources out there, it would improve SE Linux adoption so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Passenger got a new logo.
Yes.
And when I first saw that, the first things that came to mind were Voltron and Transformers. Did that have any inspiration in y'all's design of the logo?
It definitely did. A lot of people inside Phusion are anime fans, and while designing the logo, we that the old logo was a chair, and it looked really beautiful before the iOS flat icon trend sort of thing, where people moved away from skeuomorphic. But nowadays it's getting a little bit old, and we want something different. And no matter how we try to redesign it, a chair just didn't feel right. So then we tried something else, and we also tried animals, but that also didn't really feel right. Then eventually we landed with robots because we think robots are cool. But if I Google search for robot logos on Google, I find many examples of robot logos that, well, don't really excite me. But as anime fans, we've always found robots, Japanese-style robots, to be very cool. Think Gundam, think Transformers, think Gurren Lagann, or that sort of thing. And that's sort of the style that we went with. We want to renew Passenger's image. We want Passenger to have to be something cool, because we think that Passenger is cool and has a lot of new things to offer nowadays. Lots of new features. And then we also want to be a little bit bold, because the logo is a bit risky in terms because it doesn't really look serious. We have a lot of enterprise customers. So in the beginning, we were like, okay, if we go for this logo, what would enterprise customers think? And then we thought, okay, fuck this. Let's just do this and be bold.
I mean, robots are cool, so I don't think you're going to get any pushback there. It's a good logo. You know, you could definitely tell that some thought went into it.
Yeah, definitely. Our designer did a great job.
So, Docker has become a pretty big thing in the more recent years. How do you see, and what kind of direction are you guys taking Passenger to fill in with this new adoption? Does Passenger just work great with Docker, or is there other things that you guys had to do to make it play nice?
Passenger works well with Docker nowadays. Although in the early days, we had to modify things here and there to make Passenger work well with Docker. In the beginning, we found that Docker introduces what we call the PID1 zombie reaping problem. I don't know whether you have ever heard of that.
Yeah, we should explain it anyway.
Yeah, that means that if you run something inside a container, in a Docker container, it is run as PID1. But when it comes to the kernel treats PID1 as a special process. And with that specialty comes a lot of responsibility. The kernel expects PID1 to do certain things that other processes do not. And most applications are not written with that in mind. They do not do the things that the kernel expects it to do. That's why on normal systems outside of Docker container, there is a special PID1, the init process, that takes care of that. And apps usually just assume that the PID1 will take care of it. Well, inside a Docker container, there is none of that. We have documented the problem in detail on the Phusion blog. So we had to work around that inside Passenger, because if the PID1 is not there, then depending on how processes spawn, you could end up with zombie processes. So we had to work around that by adding extra checks in Passenger. And besides this, there were also some issues with people redirecting Passenger's log to def stdr and that kind of stuff, because Passenger used to assume a non-Docker environment where that's sort of where we can make certain, certain assumptions about how the file system works, but inside Docker, the file system works differently. So we had to special case that and implement a different path in order to make that work. We've done that over a few iterations, and Passenger now works very well with Docker out of the box. And in order to make people's lives easier, because Passenger is about usability, it's about not having to do the things that you don't have to do, we provide a Docker base image in which we provide various versions of Ruby, various versions of Node.js, and you can pick whatever you want. and use that to make your Docker container shipping much faster. And we also added lots of documentation because we think that documentation is important and part of the usability experience. Unfortunately, I find that a lot of Docker containers nowadays are not really that well documented, but it seems that the tide is turning and people are being more serious about documenting their containers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that seems to be a common trend, and when I stumbled upon the passenger stuff for that you've done for Docker, I was like, wow, this is some of the best explanation I've ever seen for getting a container up and running, for getting a base container up and running. Usually it's just, I'm gonna grab the container by name and I'm gonna figure it out from there, and then you always come up with some nasty surprises. But the documentation for the passenger stuff kind of lays out a lot of the gotchas, a lot of the, well, if you're going to do this, here's what you do. And I think that's really fantastic. It's a model that I like to see other people who are putting containers up there follow.
Yeah, we try to apply this philosophy of having good documentation, lots of documentation to everything we do. That's why after the Passenger 5.0 release, we released this thing called the Passenger Library, which is an entire rework of our own user manual. We added lots of more documentation. We added, for example, tutorials that explain to people how to deploy Passenger in production from the very beginning, like spinning up a VM at your hosting provider, to the end, like how do you install your Rails app, how do you run migrations, how do you bundle install, how do you use Capistrano, that sort of thing, and have everything be one single smooth path, but also structure the documentation in such a way that no matter whether you are a Ruby user or Node.js user using Passenger or Python user, you can go to the appropriate section in the documentation and the content will be tailor-made for you.
Yeah, you hear that out there? You hear that out there in software development land? Documentation is the key to a great user experience for anyone who wants to adopt your product. You're always gonna get me on the side of documentation. That's sort of what I do. Is documentation is a full-time thing. So I love it. I love to see that, and that's one of the things that I've always loved about working with Passenger, because it's with the deployment. So I would say that from day one, when Passenger launched, it sort of turned everything that I was working on up on end, because I don't know, I would say probably a month before Passenger came out, I had submitted my chapter for a book on deploying Rails applications. It was back in 2007 or so. I did a chapter on that, and it was like a month later. The whole book that we all worked on was completely out of date because Passenger was on the scene, and it sort of made everything that we were doing irrelevant and unnecessary, and in a good way, because here's Passenger, here's this tool. Oh, and here's everything you need to know about how to use it. And it's a lot of work that goes into that. And I want to hammer that home, that I'm so happy that you all did that you all put all that effort and continue to put all that effort into making things easy for people to adopt. So thank you very much.
No problem. Hearing about people grateful about the things that we do and the value that we provide makes me happy. On the topic of changing everything, I think that Docker is about to change everything again. From a survey that we recently ran from among a lot of Ruby users, we see that a lot of them use Docker. Something like 50% of the interviewees use Docker. So better Docker integration and adding more value that makes sense in a Dockerized world is definitely something that we are looking into.
Without getting too deep into that subject, at a high level, what kind of Docker integration does Passenger offer? I mean, without getting too in the weeds, just what sort of if I'm launching my applications in containers, what sort of features does Passenger offer to me?
When you use Docker together with Passenger, the main value that Passenger offers is visibility into what your application is doing on a process level and an HTTP level. Docker is, you could say that Docker is quote unquote just a process manager that works differently. So it would take care of some of the process management. It would take over some of the process management that Passenger does, but it does not provide application or HTTP level visibility, and that is what Passenger excels at. You could say that Passenger is this glue between your application and Docker that makes everything run more smoothly. It's some kind of oil that makes the machine run more smoothly than usual. And we are actively looking for new features outside the current value proposition that we could add to make things even better.
There's a teaser for you.
So, what do you see the future of Passenger as well as your company with Phusion?
That is a very broad question.
Isn't it? What kind of things, I know performance is always going to be a bigger stride, and to make Passenger even easier to use, whatever that means. But are you guys working on anything else? Have anything in the pipes that's really going to help revolutionize Ruby and Rails world even more?
Okay, what it's going to revolutionize, I don't know. But we are working on some stuff that I think would definitely make things better. For one, we are working on a graphical administration panel for Passenger so that you can manage your Passenger clusters with that. It would be clusterized, so you could attach all your Passenger servers on the admin panel, whether it is Dockerized or not, and from one single central interface, you could see what processes are running, what traffic is going on. You could set up security, because one of the things that I heard a lot from enterprise customers is they don't want to give developers SSH access to the servers, but sometimes developers need to help sysadmins to debug their apps. Well, an admin panel can help with that by providing more granular security access, this sort of thing. And the admin panel could help you expose certain details in your app to the administrators that you couldn't really do with system level tools like PS or TOP. It would be an extensible thing so that applications can provide their own information to be displayed in the admin panel. But the admin panel should also improve the usability thing a lot, because one of the things we notice is that there are so many features and configuration options in Passenger nowadays that a lot of users, especially new users, don't know what is possible with Passenger. They don't realize the full power of Passenger. This is a visibility problem, and with a graphical admin panel, we can fix that. We can display directly what kind of features Passenger have, and also maybe give people suggestions on what options they can enable in order to make Passenger work better according to their traffic patterns.
That's really cool. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to be available to enterprise only, or do you guys have a more lightweight version planned for open source? Or is it too early to tell?
It is too early to tell. Right now, we are mostly developing the thing, and how exactly that will be released and what's going to be open source and enterprise is still up for discussion. On the one hand, we want to be a good open source citizen. On the other hand, we have to be able to eat, or otherwise we can't further develop Passenger. So there's a balance that we need to strike there, and we are still very much discussing about what the balance is.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, if you ever go hungry, let me know. I can send you over some gourmet pizza rolls.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
What I think that the future for for Ruby application delivery lies is that I think a lot of Rubyists can expect more polyglot in the future. With the rise of Docker microservices, we also see that web apps are written in an increasingly diverse number of programming languages. People are slowly realizing that they should split up their application in multiple pieces and have each piece be specialized in a certain part of the problem. And that could mean using a different programming language for that. So if you are a Rubyist, then I think that you would be much more valuable as a programmer to companies if you know more than just Ruby. And Passenger wants to help you with that by introducing support for not just Ruby, not just Node.js, which we also support right now, but support for any programming language. That is definitely one of the things that we are working on. You can, for example, put your Go apps on Passenger and manage your Go apps or Java apps or whatever in exactly the same manner as you are used to with Passenger, and have a consistent operational platform for all your web apps.
Good to me.
So not that I'm encouraging it, but are you guys going to support .NET in the future with Passenger?
It would be possible.
Yeah, again, not saying that I encourage that.
there's a good
C# is quite a nice language. I don't know whether you've used yet. I really like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't say I'm a huge fan of it, but I have worked with it. But just with the whole .NET Core being open source now, and you see SQL Server migrating over to Linux, in that space, it'd be interesting to see something like Passenger supported as well. And again, not saying that I encourage it.
Yes.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to share about your company or stuff with Passenger?
I want to really thank all the people that have supported us so far, not only open source users, but also enterprise customers who have helped us be where we are right now. Because late last year, we hit the mark of 1 million annual recurring revenue. It has been, thank you. It has been such an exciting ride, and it wouldn't be possible without the community and without the customers and their trust for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any visibility of the total number of servers out there, or anything kind of generic that are actually using Passenger?
Yeah, we don't really. We have some statistics out there, but they are not compiled by us. Builtwith.com, they claim that there are 500,000 web servers out there running Passenger.
That's a pretty respectable number.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and I hear you're going to be at RailsConf this year.
Yes, we are going to RailsConf. It's going to be great. If you're going to RailsConf too, please come and meet us. We would love to talk to you. And we are also doing a research right now about what people's problems are and what we could improve in terms of Ruby application delivery. How can we help you deliver your applications faster and help you deliver your business value? We want to know this sort of stuff and find out what we can improve in Passenger. So if you have any suggestions, please talk to us either by RailsConf or sending us an email or contacting us through whatever channel you prefer.
Yeah, in hindsight, by the time this airs, either RailsConf will be going on or it may have just ended. So we'll see where it lands.
Yes.
Well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Where are you at on the internet?
We are on Twitter. It's Fusion_NL, and the NL is important because Fusion without _NL is taken by someone else who had it before us, unfortunately. Or you can send us an old-fashioned email at info@phusion.nl.
Awesome.
This episode is sponsored by Compose.io. Databases are arguably the most difficult part of the stack to manage. The last thing you want is to wake up at 4 a.m. because the database failed and you have no backups. Compose has all that covered for you, so rest assured that your database is fast, reliable, and always on. It's production-ready cloud databases on AWS and GCP for SoftLayer, so go check them out. You can pick from 9 databases including MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Redis, RethinkDB, MySQL, and one of the latest, ScyllaDB, which is a fast drop-in replacement for Cassandra. All databases come with guaranteed RAM, IOPs, and CPU that auto-scale, automatic daily and on-demand backups, high availability nodes, security you can count on with private VLAN, IP whitelisting, SSH and SSL, two-factor authentication, and much more. Deploy your database in minutes and they'll take care of all of the administrative tasks like patches and upgrades. Setup is fast and easy, so go try them out for 30 days free at compose.com/devchat.
Well, should we move on to picks?
Sure.
Sounds like we should.
All right. Brian, what picks do you have?
What picks do I have? I have one and only one pick this week, and it's for a conference in the Midwest, in the state of Wisconsin, called That Conference. And That Conference brings about 1,600 software developers and their families to summer camp for geeks. It's a tech conference, but there's a family track with all kinds of learn to program activities and science activities, things like that for kids. One of the most popular talks for kids is this talk on making circuits with Play-Doh as the conductive material, which is pretty cool. There is a robotics camp that always goes on there, where the kids are involved in building robots. There's also a bunch of great conference presentations on all things cloud and web and mobile for the attendees as well. It spans 3 days, and it's in August, and you can find out about it at thatconference.com.
Which
I highly recommend. Yeah, that conference, exactly. I highly recommend going. It's going to be August 7th to the 9th in beautiful Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, kind of in the center of the state, at the Kalahari Resort. So it's at an indoor water park. If the family kind of gets tired of nerding out, they can always hit the water park during the day, and you can meet up with your family in the evening. So it's a great time. This will be the 6th time the conference is run. I've been every time, and it's great. I will be speaking about Docker this year at this conference also. So that's another one of the plugs I'm going to do. As I'm not quite sure when I'll be speaking about it, but it will be at that conference one of those days. That's all I got for picks.
Awesome. And Hongli, what picks do you have?
I have 3 picks. The first one is a talk that is hosted on heavybit.com called Building a Better Core Pitch. Although I am a programmer, you could say that I am half a businessman because I run a company. And one of the things that really resonated with me is this talk that teaches you how to use storytelling to pitch your product to other people in a way that is engaging. The second thing that I want to pick is a tool called Liquid Planner. As a startup founder who has to manage all sorts of people that have different tasks, it is very challenging to schedule them in such a way that everybody is scheduled efficiently and that everybody has enough things to do, but also to coordinate different kinds of project deadline between teams. And with most of the planning tools that I've used, they all boil down to specifying the begin and end dates of projects myself, and then manually checking whether specific people are overbooked or not. That doesn't make any sense because that would mean that I, as a human, am doing the brunt of the calculation work. What do we have computers for? And Liquid Planner seems to be doing exactly what I wanted to do. You enter tasks, you enter dependencies, you enter estimates of how long a task is going to take, and who could do a task. And then Liquid Planner will calculate a planning for you automatically. And that way you don't have to specify begin and end dates. You just know where the begin and end dates are. And it really helps me with coordinating things. And finally, I don't know whether picking a Ruby Rogues podcast as a pick is cheating, but I really like the Writing for Developers podcast. And you could probably know why, because I talk so much about documentation. It's really important.
Yeah, that's a good podcast.
Awesome. Well, I have just 2 picks. One is a encouragement that if you're not already doing so, check out continuous integration. Just pushing up your code to your version control and have it automatically run your test suite. It's a really important thing to have for any application going out to production. And then also, my second pick is one that everyone has probably already heard of, and it is Slack. There's so many different application plugins that you can get feedback from your builds and just communicate and collaborate with a team remotely or even within the same office. It's a very handy tool. Well, Hongli, we really appreciate you coming on here. I must admit, I was very giddy to get to talk with you because, I've been a longtime Passenger fan and love what you guys are doing.
Oh, I'm honored.
Well, I'll catch you guys next week.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.